I presented data at ASCO this year about tivozanib, specifically a post hoc analysis from TiVo-3, which was a trial that looked at tivozanib versus sorafenib in a refractory setting, patients who had gotten 2 or more prior systemic treatments. I've heard people say that if a patient progresses through a very VEGF receptor targeted therapy, so one that's very selective against the receptor, such as axitinib, that they really need to go on a multi-targeted therapy, because if you give them another very selective therapy, that they won't respond. And so we could look at this in TiVo-3 by looking back at all the patients who had gotten prior axitinib. So axitinib and tivozanib are fairly biochemically similar in the sense that they both hit the VEGF receptor and they don't hit much else. So they're very selective. And so we looked at a number of patients who had gotten prior axitinib, which is now very much part of the frontline standard of care in kidney cancer with the combination of pembrolizumab and axitinib. And we looked at how they did on TiVo-3, that is, if they got subsequent tivozanib or if they got subsequent sorafenib. And the top line results are that in that subset, the results were similar as the intent to treat population, or similar as patients who didn't get prior axitinib, meaning there was a progression-free survival advantage and a response rate advantage as well. And the tolerability was about the same as the general population. So it really refutes that notion that if you get a selective VEGF inhibitor, you have to go to something multi-targeted. In fact, in this case, the selective TKI, that is tivozanib, was more effective than the multi-targeted TKI of sorafenib. Now, sorafenib is not really in common use anymore. Other drugs such as cabozantinib and now lenvatinib, et cetera, which are multi-targeted, would be more likely in use, but it was just the one chosen for that trial. So I think it at least provides some data for clinicians to know that they have some flexibility when choosing TKIs. Tivozanib is not approved in the US yet, but when it is, obviously it will allow that flexibility in the refractory setting and some confidence that patients can and do respond to this drug in a refractory setting, regardless of prior treatment. I think it can and will move to earlier lines of therapy. If a patient fails an IO-TKI doublet, in essence, they've had 2 different therapies, although they were combined, and I think it certainly could be used in that setting. Again, there's not really, I would say there's more indirect data than direct data, but we know TKIs are active in that setting, and again, from a tolerability standpoint, I think it's the best tolerated TKI. It's the kind of thing, like, it'd be great to have a big trial that compares all the doublets so we could tease out which one is best, et cetera, but it's not going to happen. So whatever my opinion is, and I don't know that, frankly, that's the best use of our resources. Kidney cancer, thankfully, is a relatively rare disease. And so I think we need to be just a little more thoughtful about the resources, human resource and patient resources that we're using to study questions. And I think the field is better off studying other novel combinations of 2 drugs, of 3 drugs, looking at biomarker-based trial design, et cetera. I think that's where our effort should be spent. To do a trial of, axi-pembro versus cabo-nivo versus len-pembro, yeah, we'd all love to see the results, but I'm not really sure that advances the field. We have big data sets. We can compare, although imperfectly, across trials. And I might choose regimen A for certain reasons, and somebody else might choose regimen B, and I think that's fine. I think, patients are benefiting either way. I don't think there are more similarities than differences. So, while useful, practically it won't happen. And again, frankly, I think our efforts are better focused elsewhere.